Hello and welcome everyone. We have an exciting webinar for you. My name is Preeti Khurana. I'm a chartered accountant with ClearTax. I have with me Shashi Jha from WazirX. Shashi, a very warm welcome to you. And today is actually a very interesting topic that we are going to be talking about. It's the talk of the town. It's been all over the newspapers in the past few days. And I'm sure everyone has heard a lot about it. But today we are going to talk about basics, about some compliances. We'll try to understand cryptocurrencies in more detail. And before we begin, Shashi, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Preeti. So I started my career primarily within banking and financial services companies, both for Indian entities as well as multinational banks and ventures in India, wherein I primarily was responsible for creating compliance framework, setting up internal control infrastructure, and a variety of corporate commercial legal matters.
Sure.
So during this period, I have worked across almost all layers of compliance, be it front-end compliances wherein we take care of KYC and customer onboarding related matters, then policy level stuff and policy creations and obviously framework. So that's very briefly about me. Before this, I have worked across a few banks like Australia New Zealand Banking Group, where I was managing their divisional compliance and risk as well as fraud control. And I have also briefly worked with Travelex in India as their India compliance and risk lead. I worked with Kotak Mahindra Bank as part of their compliance and internal controls team. I worked with ABN AMRO Bank as part of their KYC, sanctions, and due diligence team. And briefly, I worked with Barclays in India as part of their group internal control before they decided to exit India retail. So that's briefly my background. Here at WazirX, I was hired to essentially set up compliance and legal team and set up process, policies, procedures, frameworks, and obviously, help with a lot of public policy matters because crypto is something where policies and regulations are absent, and our policies has to be aligned with whatever is available, typically international best practices, and that's what we have been doing. So when I came here, I created the framework for compliances, improved some policies and procedures on KYC, AML, combating financing of terrorism, etc., and also expanded my team significantly to take care of the onerous compliance responsibilities which a sector like crypto should have. Yeah.
Right. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, that sounds like a very exciting career around compliances, and I'm sure we have much to learn from you today. Now, before we begin, I think it's important that we just spend a few minutes discussing what cryptocurrency really is, because we know this is a new kind of a financial asset, and it's becoming very popular. There was a time when a lot of us understood what fixed deposits are. I mean, it was a household thing, and now we all understand equity shares, we understand mutual funds, and now this is a new sort of an asset class that has recently come up. And it may have garnered a lot of interest, but there may not be enough understanding about the product. So, I'll just like sort of highlight it, and then maybe you can explain in greater detail. What I understand is that cryptocurrency is actually simply a method of storing value digitally. And it's unlike traditional currencies. It's not in any physical form. It's not issued by any bank, and it's across borders. So it's kind of borderless. There are no barriers to this kind of crypto, and it is supported by what we understand as blockchain technology. And therefore, this has become like an asset for people, perhaps with no underlying value, no guarantee, but still an asset that is generating a lot of interest. Now, whenever there is a new kind of a technology, it always makes things exciting. Whenever new technology comes through, there are a lot of people who deal with it, who interact with that technology, and who invest in that technology. So, with this kind of a backdrop, how would you help our viewers understand cryptocurrencies in a more deeper way? Like, how can they really make sense of this kind of an asset class?
Certainly, Preeti. So when you mention that cryptos are effectively digital and they do not have physical existence, you are correct in that way. That crypto is an asset which is digital and resides only on blockchain based distributed ledger technologies. However, saying that they do not have any inherent value probably would be slightly misleading, or saying that they are not backed by any underlying asset would also be not a right interpretation.
Okay.
If we start with the first implementation of Bitcoin, which was created based on fundamental mathematical and software breakthroughs, and which was obviously recognized by scholars across the world. So what it actually did was it allowed for the first time in human history to the participants to electronically transfer value between each other in a transparent and verifiable manner without the need for any central intermediary. So it was groundbreaking in that sense. It has evolved since the initial Bitcoin days. Now we have seen close to more than 10,000 different kind of crypto tokens available, crypto coins and tokens available in the market. And almost all of them claim to have different use cases, different underlying projects. If you look at Ethereum, ETH, it has been used across a wide variety of purposes, starting with smart contracts, wherein your contract essentially gets recorded on a blockchain-based ledger, ensuring that it's tamper-proof, it's fully reliable, fully transparent. Anyone can actually go and check. Same way, there are other utility tokens, and then there are different exchange coins. If you look at WazirX, we have our own in-house exchange coin called WRX. What WRX does is it facilitates a little smoother transaction fee payment experience for our users, apart from other use cases, including use of WRX in our NFT marketplace, where you need to have WRX to basically buy NFTs, purchase NFTs from the marketplace. So, if I have to categorize different kind of crypto tokens or cryptocurrencies into buckets, so we have primarily coins, which are essentially a store of value. You can say Bitcoin is essentially being used nowadays primarily as a store of value. Then we have utility tokens. Then we have something which is widely known as stable coin. Stable coins are wherein you basically peg the particular cryptocurrency to a fiat currency. For example, if you look at USDT or Tether or USDC, so what they do is they peg their value to dollar. Sure. What it does is it allows smooth transfer of value across blockchain network through that stablecoin network. Similarly, there are other type of coins and tokens which allow you to participate in the enterprise. Nowadays, cryptos are evolving, blockchain technology is evolving, and you also see decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAO. So what they do is they're saying that you can have an enterprise which is fully participative, fully democratic, and limited to those who want to participate in it through a democratic process. If you want to participate, you need to have the specific tokens of that DAO. And obviously, they're countryless.
It's actually getting deeper and slightly more complicated. As I understand, like you explained about, there are certain coins, and there could be stable coins, and then there are also NFTs. Now, I've experienced the WazirX app myself, and I've tried to understand, how do people invest? And, my basic understanding is that you transfer money to your WazirX wallet, and then, you can go ahead and make purchases. And that sounds actually pretty fairly straightforward and simple, that, you have an exchange, like WazirX is an exchange like many others, and you can choose a coin or a cryptocurrency you want to invest in, and you can transfer money and make that purchase. But actually, crypto investing is not so simplistic. There are several other ways to make money, like we've heard of airdrops, forks. There are also several other mechanisms. Like people have been asking us that is it possible for them to buy a currency in the US or in some other market and then be able to sell it here in India? and be able to do like cross exchange transfers and all of that. So, spread some light around what are the various ways to invest in cryptocurrencies. Say I bought, Bitcoins for 10,000 rupees. Now, what all I can do with that? Like I can hold that currency and wait for the value to increase. But what else I can do with that kind of a holding? I mean, just help us understand. You're on mute, Shashi.
Apologies. Yeah, so obviously you can acquire these cryptocurrencies through various ways. The easiest is you create a user account on an exchange like ours, WajirX. You bring your fiat currency, INR, in our case, and then you use that to buy any preferred currency or crypto coin of your choice, any other digital token of your choice. Another is you mine those. Like, you must have heard about Bitcoin mining. Well, mining is a complex cryptographic process, but you can get new coins through mining as well. So whenever a new coin comes in, depending on how the blockchain is structured, there are ways through which you can participate in the mining program. Another is through airdrops. So when a new coin typically launches, they want to popularize, they want to essentially socialize that coin among the wider audience. And what they do is the easiest way for them typically becomes that, you airdrop a few coins to those users who meet the criteria which you have specified. So airdrops again remains a popular method of acquiring a new coin. Another is through staking. So when you have, say, some underlying asset, like if you have five, let's say, Bitcoin, you can stake those and earn returns, something like interest. While it's not interest, it's called staking reward, but it's similar to, so you'll get a fixed return on periodic basis based on how much value you are staking. So these are some of the methods. Now, in terms of using transfer, so yes, you asked whether if you bought something in United States and you want to transfer it. So due to the nature of blockchain, right, you can transfer your holdings or your coins across the world without any restriction. The only restriction is that the receiving party or wallet, if it is your own wallet. So let's say if you have an account in WajirX and if you have an account on Binance in US, right? So you acquired something on Binance US, let's say 5 Bitcoin, and you want to transfer it to your wallet in WajirX in India. So you can simply do the transfer. For transfer, obviously, you need to pay some network fees.
Okay.
They're not exchange fees, they're network fees, but they're fractional, typically 0.0005 or 0.006%. But you can also transfer those to your own private cold wallets and store it for a long term. Right? So these are some of the methods through which you can transfer your coins or holdings across the world. So it's just a click of a button. You need to have an address. You input that in the system, and it transfers instantly and gets verified on the blockchain, depending on the specific blockchain, within minutes or at times within seconds.
Right. That's quite interesting, actually, because this kind of a scenario would have severe tax implications in the sense, depending upon what your residential status is, where those coins were mined, and there's so much lack of clarity around, how these things should be taxed. But I'm assuming that is this something that Indians are able to do easily, like buy coins outside of India and transfer them to, say, any exchange in India, WazirX or one of the other exchanges? Like, is this something that you see happening pretty commonly? How does it really work?
Yeah, so for buying any coin outside India, you need to have fiat available with you outside India. So if you have legitimate sources of earning foreign exchange, and if you have legal reasons to retain them outside India, especially you mentioned NRIs and non-residents, right? So obviously, if you're earning those, you can buy using that fiat currency. Let's say you earn in US dollar or euro or GBP. You can onboard on any exchange outside India, use that fiat to buy currencies and then transfer the value to India. I understand due to the nature of tech and Bitcoin or any other cryptos being probably very advanced tech, which traditional banking or traditional laws have not figured yet in terms of how to regulate them. It's still a learning process for regulators across the world. One has to be careful so that one doesn't end up being wrong side of the law. However, remittances generally, while remittances I'm using very loosely here, cryptocurrencies and coins are very different from fiat currencies. At least in India, they're not categorized as currencies, and our central bank, Reserve Bank of India, has been categorical on record to say that they're not currencies. So one has to be careful with that, sort of transfer. Talking of transfers, yes, there would be tax implications, and I believe now let me change the tables, right, and
Sure.
understand from you as a tax practitioner with years of experience, what is your view around taxation of these currencies and coins in the hands of Indians who are investing in crypto?
Right. So yeah, as you rightly said, like there is a lack of regulation around several aspects of cryptocurrencies, and one of the important aspects is taxes. And when we talk about taxes, there are two kinds of taxes in most of the countries, which are direct taxes and indirect taxes. In the sense of India, like I think even though the Income Tax Act does not specifically mention digital currencies or cryptocurrencies, it is vast enough, it is wide enough to make sure that any kind of income that you generate from selling cryptocurrencies will become taxable in India. So there is no doubt on the aspect that whatever income you have earned from selling these cryptocurrencies, that income is taxable. Now, whenever we discuss taxability of anything, the first question that comes to our mind is how do we tax it? What are the rates that we should apply? And we need to address these kind of questions. So now, if you look at the Income Tax Act, it's actually broadly divided into 5 types of incomes, which is your salary income, then you have business income, you have income from owning a house, and then you have capital gains income, and then you have income from other sources, which is primarily like a residual head, where you report interest income from savings account or fixed deposits and stuff like that. Now, when we come to cryptocurrencies, you know, most of the people actually hold it to gain from appreciation in its value. So that's the primary intent. It has started to compete with other financial assets, and generally people own it to gain from the upside. Now, it's so highly speculative and there's so much noise around it that the gains can be phenomenal, and at the same time losses can be terrible. So both the situations are present in the market. Now, when we talk about considering whether this is a capital asset, just the way shares are, or mutual funds are, or land and building is, then we need to understand how do we tax it, like how do we report it in our tax return forms, and how do we pay taxes on it. So whenever you talk about a capital asset, and the definition of capital asset in the Income Tax Act is also pretty inclusive. So it does not say that only these 4 or 5 assets are, you need to pay capital gains tax on it. It says that capital assets include, and then it goes on to list a couple of items. And therefore, the definition itself is inclusive, and it would be wise to actually consider this as a capital asset. Even, our regulator, RBI, all of these people are saying that this is not going to be a legal tender. It's most likely a digital asset. So with that concept in mind, we can safely assume that this is a capital asset. And when we talk about capital asset, we need to understand, what will make it, selling it, whatever gains you have, what will make it a long-term capital gain versus a short-term capital gain, because the rate of tax for both these types of gains are fairly different. So if you, going by the general premise of the Income Tax Act, it has a residual policy where, it actually specifies that if you have shares, then you need to hold them for a year. If you have debt mutual funds, hold them for a certain time period. Then it has property you should hold for 2 years. And everything else, which includes gold and other assets, it says that you should hold for a period of 3 years. So we'll apply the same logic, and, in the absence of any formal regulation, any rules, any notifications, we can assume that the same time period of holding 3 years, if you've held it beyond a period of 3 years, then you pay long-term capital gains tax. Now, whenever we talk about long-term capital gains tax, the next logical question is, am I allowed to index my costs, and whether I should pay a concessional rate of tax, which is 20%. So, there is a lot of debate around that, whether something which is not even considered legal tender, which is not considered regulated, it's unregulated asset, it's not governed by any rules and policies, should such assets be allowed concessional rates of tax? So there are these aspects to consider, and if you consider it less than, if you've held it for less than 3 years, then you may consider it a short-term capital gain, and then you pay tax according to your slab rates. I think that's pretty straightforward. Tax department would be happy to receive, taxes based on your overall slab rate. So that's one aspect. But these days, and I'm sure you can add to that, is that a lot of people invest just the way they do trading. They like sort of open a wallet, and every day they are buying currencies, they are selling currencies, and they have huge volumes, they have frequent transactions. And in such a situation, I feel it would be wiser to consider all of this as a business income. So, if you are someone who's running a wallet, who's doing several transactions, perhaps many in a week, many over a month, then I would not call it, you're not holding it for increase in value over a period of time. You're actually holding to gain from day to day trades, and that would make it a business. And therefore, it would be wiser to report it as a business income. Now, now that we are all talking about I just want to re-clarify once more that there is no right now, there is no nuance in the Income Tax Act, no specific regulation which is available. And while there is a bill which is going to show up in the parliament, it may not have the tax it may not have the tax notifications or rules, etc., because that may be considered at a much later date. I think the government right now is really focused on regulating it. But just for the sake of understanding for our listeners, it's very, very important to understand that whatever gains and income you've had, and Shashi mentioned about having doing staking and earning an interest income. So all of those incomes, remember that all of that is going to be taxable. You will have to pay tax on it.
Yeah, that's a nice explanation around taxation, Preeti, and you beautifully summed up that taxation would primarily depend on how you use the asset. So if you are a regular trader and use cryptos as your business, then obviously it should be classified as business income. For layman investor like me who invests and waits similar to what I do for securities, the tax treatment would be typical to any other asset within capital gain category. While I have seen some instances around taxes department at times taking a view that some of these should be also categorized as income from other sources. You rightly pointed out it's a very evolving concept. Department itself is trying to find the best way to categorize this income and tax on that. Now, since we are talking about taxes, and taxes are part of compliance, I'll very quickly, either you can provide more detail. Recently, I believe not recently, during March 24th or 25th, earlier this year, 2021, Ministry of Corporate Affairs actually issued a circular wherein they asked companies to make certain disclosures of crypto holdings and profits, etc., derived from crypto, and end of the year for the purpose of including in the balance sheet. Do you have a view on that? Why department would possibly have done that, and what are the implications for broader corporate? Because I'm assuming a lot of our viewers today are professionals who may be responsible to report some of these things.
Right. Yeah, I think that was an interesting step where they issued a circular saying that if you are a company, then you have to disclose your crypto holdings as you do all kinds of reportings. And I think the intent really is to see what kind of formal money is getting into these kind of assets. I think that is the intent. I think the government did not foresee a lot of individual investors getting into cryptos in a big way. So at that time, crypto is still getting popular. At that time, it was also popular, but the government actually felt that perhaps these are enterprises, and they need to have an understanding whether enterprises are getting formally into this kind of a currency. But the fact is that there are around some reports have suggested, and there are 20 million people in India who invest in cryptocurrencies, and I think that's just phenomenal. I think this is something that cannot be stopped as such. The government cannot just one fine day wake up and put a complete ban on it. So they will have to regulate it in some fashion. But like we were talking about cryptos being highly speculative, and being subject to, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and it's the talk of the town. And I can see that there are several questions that people are asking on our YouTube channel as well. Before I come to the rest of it, I want to ask you one question, which is somebody saying, if I convert my crypto to another crypto, say BTC to ETH, will I incur taxes? I think this is like a very very popular question. Like we keep hearing this, and people want to know, like, just the way mutual funds are. So if you exit one mutual fund and you get into another, it's a taxable event. You sell one equity share, you get into another, it's a taxable event. In fact, there is no provision in the law, even if you are investing the entire money. And even at the time of mutual funds, we used to get queries, look, I pulled out my money from one mutual fund and I invested the entire proceeds into another mutual fund, so why should I pay taxes? But the reality is that this kind of a conversion, in my view, should be a taxable event. You exit from one currency. I don't know if it's possible to really convert without hitting the wallet, and what happens to the gains that you may have had, or if you're able to convert it entirely. But in my view, it could potentially be a taxable event. So just throw some light on that.
Uh, Rather, I'll complicate the question for you a little more. Yeah. See, while I agree with your view that conversion effectively means that you have realized the gain of price of asset appreciation. So today, if I had bought Bitcoin at, let's say, 30 lakh rupees, and today's price it's say 48 lakh rupees, and if I convert that for Ether, so I have effectively a capital gain or price appreciation of 18 lakh rupees, say during the span of let's say a month. Now, I use that money to buy Ether. Now, complication here is that you are not converting your Bitcoin holding to INR first, right? You're not converting into fiat. You are directly using an exchange ratio, like if you have USD euro pair of foreign currency, let's say, you are using that exchange ratio and converting it directly. Same is the case here. So how do you tax that? I mean, obviously, department has to form a view because it's an area where there is a lack of clarity at what stage taxation event happens. Normally, as any income taxpayer probably appreciates the fact that the moment you hit an income threshold, I mean not threshold, but income event, you become liable to pay tax. So here, capital gain event in terms of exchange would become. However, given that crypto is a very new tech, I believe department also has to take its view in line with the new tech. While I would be wishful if I say that ideally department should, and I'm not saying that this is a tax advice. This is my view, which again is a wishful thinking. This is not a correct advice, but I hope this becomes true some schemes. That when you exit the pair into INR, because ultimately the point of investing is exit, right? So when you exit, obviously the difference between your initial investment in INR and final exit price in INR ideally should be taxed. But whether the department would accept that explanation or not, or whether that would be in line with our current taxation legislations is something which needs to be seen. Obviously, currently it doesn't align with current tax practices, and it might sound very futuristic tax practice, but I would like that stage to I would like the department to evolve to that stage for crypto taxation. However, currently, yes, the moment you change from BTC to Ether, Bitcoin to Ether, there's a tax liability. I mean, how you determine that liability, that how much I need to pay, is something which you need to work on. You need to take advice from tax advisors like ClearTax, etc., and your own advisors. But you are liable to pay tax today. obviously, we are waiting for a more evolved tax administration on this, but yeah, that's the state today.
Yeah, I think that's there is a lot of expectation from the department as to how deeply they understand these transactions. And the other question I think is also around trail, like how do you ensure that there is a proper trail of these conversions, and what are the points of taxation? I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's actually pretty exciting in the sense even for the department to consider these various aspects, these various types of ways of making money from cryptos and how they can really tax it. But I would assume this is an exciting time for the government as well, because it's a way to increase their revenues from taxes. But at the same time, I think a big concern that investors have and the government has is whether all of this is safe now. Because there's so much speculation and prices rise and fall so easily. There are daily drops, and we've even heard of like more than 1,000% gains, and several hundreds of drop in crypto values. Now, Shashi, if I would like to, like you to just explain to our viewers whether is it safe to invest, and what are the various types of checks? I've heard that exchanges have put together some mechanism of self-regulation. Even though there's nothing that really regulates what you do, there is a mechanism that you have put in place to make sure that there is not unaccounted money this is going which is getting invested. And also from the government standpoint, is it something that people should be ready for crashes? Because I usually recommend to people that if you only have if you have risk capital, money that you're willing to lose completely, I mean, go for cryptocurrencies. Otherwise, I mean, you need to have a lot more like deeper understanding. You need to be safe with your money. You need to be safe in the manner in which you're investing. So, just help us understand, all of this self-regulation that you may be doing at WazirX, and how safe it is to really invest in cryptocurrencies.
Thanks, Priti. That's a very interesting question, and I'll take it in two parts. First, I'll talk about the whole self-regulation and how we at WazirX Exchange handle those, and then we'll talk about what are some of the best practices for safe investing within crypto space. So, in early 2020, probably April, when the banking whole excuse me when the whole banking ban was lifted by Supreme Court by overturning RBI circular, and there was a mass drove of new users started, coming onto platform. We realized that, earlier we were a very niche player. Most of the investors at that time were highly educated, technically sound investors who understood the risk. And crypto, you rightly mentioned, is a very volatile asset class and very high risk asset class. It's not for everyone. Unless you understand what you are getting into, unless you understand and are comfortable with the volatility and price fluctuations based on your own risk profile, risk appetite, because every investor has their different risk appetite. So what we did was we formed a consortium, sort of a self-regulatory organization, sort of under the banner of Internet and Mobile Association. This is called Blockchain and Crypto Asset Council. Currently, there are more than 30 blockchain and crypto exchange companies as part of this. So we started with basics. We said, even though there is no regulatory guideline, even though the sector is not formally regulated, let's treat ourselves as any other financial service, new age financial service business. And what would a new age financial service business do is they will create infrastructure for onboarding customer based on identification. So we built KYC as a primary filter for onboarding customer. And as part of that, obviously, we stick to whatever KYC requirements are mentioned under PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, that we need to identify the customer, we need to verify their identity. We also took a leaf from Financial Action Task Force recommendations on virtual asset and virtual asset service providers, which is again a global body, and its recommendations are globally followed. So we took a leaf from there and incorporated most of their recommendations into our self-regulatory mechanism. So that wasn't KYC. We are conscious that any new thing or any financial value transfer mechanism will always be susceptible to exploitation by bad actors. and they would try to launder money through the system. They will try to finance terrorism and do all sort of bad things, including frauds, scams, etc. So we realized that this is, if we want to make crypto safer for everyone, so that everyone can participate in the sector, we need to make it safer. And as part of that effort, we built procedure and processes around transaction monitoring, periodic, depending on your profiling. We start looking at both normal and enhanced due diligence, start looking at, where you are sending and receiving your crypto and values from. Are they from a known scam wallet? Are you sending to a known scam wallet, etc.? So that was around self-regulation. Now, if I take a moment to talk about what we do at WazirX, what we do is we rely on two layers of KYC checks. One is our own in-house, wherein if you want to onboard with us as a new user, you need to provide your PAN card and PAN number, which again gets validated through government NSDL database. And you need to provide an additional document, either your passport or your Aadhaar card or driver's license, which to the extent possible again gets verified through government database. We also ask for a selfie, live selfie, wherein you need to take a live picture so that we are sure that you are the person you are claiming to be. But then we ask you to link your bank account, because we do not allow any cash transactions. So all transfers in and out of the exchange has to be through bank channels only, fiat transactions. So when you try to link a particular bank account on our system, either a new account, if you are an existing user, then we validate that account as well to ensure that if, say, I'm saying that the account belongs to Preeti, it actually is owned by Preeti, right? How we do that is something called penny drop. So we send some small value to your account, bank sends a feedback, and based on that, we match the names. If the names match, then obviously we'll allow you to, so we call the process whitelisting. So this is a surrogate level of KYC again. So one is I'm doing a primary check, another I'm taking a surrogate check through banking system. Then you can easily transfer. Now coming back to safe investing opportunities, because I understand that you will see various schemes and scammers and fraudsters in the market. We say that, if don't rely on social media rumors that, if you have seen a lot of Telegram and YouTube based influencers claiming that a particular coin will go 5,000% or something within, say, 5 days or 10 days or whatever. Don't believe on those. Avoid them. Research before investing into any new crypto asset. And also determine your own risks. Within crypto, there are different coins who have different risk profile, as fluctuation levels, variations in prices. So a relatively new coin will probably have more variation in prices, more fluctuation compared to some of the more established things. So we need to be very careful that where we are ending up investing. Another aspect which we need to look closely at is if someone is referring you something. Coins where the intrinsic value increase is based primarily on referrals. So I say that you avoid them. Similarly, whenever you try to look at a new coin, look at the ownership structure, look at the project, what they are trying to do, what new things they are trying to do, or if they are trying to improve on some existing things, what are those? Look at their white paper. Look at the people behind that. Because obviously someone with established history of those things would be more, I'll say, reliable entrepreneur compared to someone who may be a fly-by-night operator. Don't get conned by something like Squid Game coin or something, right? Yeah. So there so many of them. Avoid those.
Right.
And yeah. So start small, understand the market. Then only putting a lot of money, and don't leverage yourself. My last advice: don't leverage yourself. Use your own money, which you are willing to lose. So these are some of the things which comes off my mind. Yeah,
I think that's excellent advice, and I would just resonate what you're saying is that firstly, it's very, very important to understand what your risk profile is. Are you ready to bear risk? Are you ready for your money to become zero? Of course, you may become a billionaire, but are you ready for it to reach zero. I think that's the kind of risk we are looking at. So be very, very sure about that. I think the second very important and critical point is to be aware of what you're buying, to really truly understand what is the cryptocurrency, what is the underlying value in it, to read about it, to to get knowledge about it, to to see what is the world saying about it. I think gaining that kind of understanding is very, very important. A lot of people may consider it to be like a gamble, where they are putting in money and they're just betting on some coins because they heard it on a Telegram channel or they heard it on YouTube or somewhere. But it makes a lot of sense to truly understand what the underlying value is. I think those are very, very relevant in today's times, and especially with something which is completely, at least as of now, just completely unregulated. We are
Correct.
also getting a lot of questions, and I'm going to come to that. And I see that there are questions like, what is the rate of tax? I want to pay tax, but I don't know how much I need to pay. Now, this is where clear tax comes into the picture. We have tax experts who understand what kind of transactions you're doing, who are going to help you figure out, by looking at your statement, what are these various ways to taxable events in your statement, how you should pay tax, how you can potentially save tax on whatever gains you had. So they'll help you understand your statement, they'll help you understand various ways in which you could be taxed and what is the latest regulation around it. So I would highly encourage listeners to actually reach out to us to understand taxability of your cryptocurrencies. Remember, there is no law right now, but the onus of paying taxes and the onus of filing your tax return is completely on you. It's not on your exchange to deduct any TDS, because there are no TDS regulations. It's not on the government to come after you to pay taxes, but the onus right now of paying taxes on any of these kind of gains is completely on you. So I can see your daughter there, and I would like to say hi to her. And yeah, great, wonderful to have her. Are you the youngest investor ever on cryptocurrencies?
She
Do
is
you
the
own
crypto girl in
crypto?
family. Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful.
Just
Yeah,
wait.
you can,
Sorry.
like,
Go.
she can sit here. It's absolutely
No,
fine. All right. So I
it's
want to.
her time. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. My kids are outside. They have, like, my son has a piano class and my daughter's playing. So I can totally relate to that. There's one more question here. If I'm trading in USDT pair, then I can do any number of transactions. And will I get taxed only when I convert back to INR? Now, this is a very common question, and we already discussed this in a way that if you keep transacting in USDT, you keep exiting, you keep entering, then will I get taxed only when I convert back to INR? Unfortunately, we may be experts in some way, but we don't know the answer to that, and we are hoping there will be regulation which will help us understand this. But Shashi, just chime in on how does this really happen? Like, I'm curious to know, how is this person trading in USDT pair and doing any number of transactions? Like, how is this really working for him?
So probably the user is referring to that, I have some USDT and I'm converting it, buying, using that USDT. I'm buying same thing which you mentioned, BTC ETH pair. Same thing here. This person probably is using USDT, Bitcoin, USDT, Ether, USDT, BNB, USDT, something else, ADA, Ripple, XRP, something else. So that pair conversion can happen, and that's where I believe, when I said that tax department probably need to understand the nonsense of crypto business, while currently uh, we all want to be on the safe side, on the right side of law, and we can say that every trading, every conversion effectively is probably a taxable event for you. But obviously, at a future stage, we'd like government or tax department to have this clarity or issue a clarification that maybe you can treat it differently. But currently, unfortunately, that's the reality. That even though you keep on trading, converting, you are liable to pay taxes. That's my view. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm with you on this. Because there is no regulation, it would make a lot more sense to actually pay on every event of conversion. There's one more question, which is, how do we tax mining as it contains? I think he wants to know, how should we pay tax on mining as it contains equipment costs, as well as paying electricity bills. And I know that when you are a miner, and I don't know how many, like there are very few miners in India who are really doing, some superior kind of Bitcoin work, but yeah, and working on blockchain technology. But if you are somebody who's into mining, then these are self-generated assets, and there is a specific section in the Income Tax Act which refers to self-generated assets, and this will be business income. And whatever expenses you are incurring, of course you are buying some heavy equipment, computers with high processing ability, and you have electricity backups, and you're incurring all of these costs will become deductions for you. They'll be treated as expenses of your business, and you will be able to claim them. So there will be no concept of gains, capital gains, long term or short term, but this is purely a business. Remember that very few miners in India, although we do have some of them as our customers, so do connect with us, and we'll help you figure out how to do this. But largely speaking, this is, again, not clarified by the tax department yet, but we do hope there will be clarity in the near future on this. All right, I'm just checking if we have more questions. And okay, there is a comment for you. It says, "Wow, Shashi, so nice to see you and your daughter. Very insightful session." Okay, thank you so much, Ajay. I'm sure.
Thanks for the comment. She is looking for a mummy who probably has gone out. Yeah, and like I said, it's her time currently. I usually spend the time to.
Okay, there's one more question which says, "Please tell us about private cryptocurrency." And now this is, ever since the government has done that two-liner disclosure that all private cryptocurrencies will be banned, suddenly there's fury in the market, and people are confused what are private cryptocurrencies, and there is a host of definitions. There are some publicly available definitions which mean that private cryptocurrencies are a certain type of currencies, but ultimately we have to look at the law. We have to see how government will define private cryptocurrencies, just the way government even defines what is interest income. So if you open the Income Tax Act, it may sound like a very layman term, but the Income Tax Act even defines what is interest income, or what is a startup. So it defines all of these aspects. It even defines what is plant and machinery. So it's actually fairly detailed, and more details will come through. But Shashi, just a word of reassurance for all those who are listening in around, what is this noise about?
Certainly. In fact, I believe the people are referring to the specific agenda item listed in parliamentary business, right? Finance Secretary today has probably been on record, and I'm referring to a news item in some of the media channels, News 18, etc., and where he has said that consider that as more as a clerical error. Currently, the bill is still being drafted, right? And our understanding, at least, is that that government is looking at positively regulating this sector in line with global best practices. So, restricting private currency or anything. Well, first, we do not have any definitions, etc. But even restricting would be difficult, or it's. I'll say, let's not confuse ourselves just because some agenda item has been inserted. So far, the clarifications, the assurances from government and ministries have been very different, and they have been very positive that they are going to regulate it, not ban anything. So I'll say let's wait and wait for more clarity. Wait for the draft for the draft to come into public domain. Yeah. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, I think we're all just waiting excitedly for what's in store for cryptocurrencies. Any further questions? If our host can share with us, then I'm just going to address it, or I'm just going to close this conversation because Shashi is having his BBC moment right now. You're on mute, Shashi.
Yes, I mean most of us, operate nowadays from home.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right. So there's somebody who's saying thanks for answering all our questions and helping us understand the nuances. Very thankful to both of you. All right. Yeah, I think I'll end this here then. And thank you so much, Shashi, for coming over and clarifying a lot of issues. And probably we'll catch up again once we have the bill with us, and we'll have a lot more to discuss then.
Thanks, Preeti, for providing this platform to share my understandings and views around crypto and to share what are some of the best practices. And obviously, to expel any fear which investor community in crypto typically has. So obviously, and clear text for providing the platform. Thank you all very much. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again, Shashi. Goodbye.